Once we have our preliminary sketch, then we can start working on our final design. So probably one of the most important parts of our design is going to be the portrait. So I'm going to show you in this lesson some kind of tips and tricks to getting a really good portrait drawing and getting it to look kind of exactly how you want it to look. Now, if you are a very comfortable drawer and you love drawing and you have your own style, you should just jump in and draw this however you want. Maybe you like to draw kind of cartoon characters, or maybe you like to draw anime characters. Maybe you already have your own style. If that's the case, you should do that. I really want with these posters your own personal voice and style to show through. When you start drawing your design, just remember, when you're working on this portrait, start off by just keeping it light with just a pencil and a paper, right? And you can always go in and erase if you make a mistake. Just start off just by keeping it light. At this point in the stage, you might have a photograph that you're working from, whether the photograph is on the phone or it's a photograph that you have, or maybe it's from a book. Make sure you're looking at the photograph as you're drawing it. So, not every person is going to be confident just starting to just draw on the paper, right? I'm going to show you now some different tips and tricks that you can use to kind of get a really beautiful portrait drawing without having to worry about drawing it straight from scratch. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can create a tracing. Now, some people might say, well, tracing, isn't that cheating? In my opinion, tracing is not cheating at all. It's actually a really great tool that we as artists can use to get a really interesting drawing. So, for this activity, what you'll need kind of a few different materials based on what you'll be doing. You'll need paper and a pencil. If you're working in your sketchbook, you may want to tear the paper out of your sketchbook for this. So here's a few different ways that you can do a tracing. One thing that you can do is, and this is optional, if you have tracing paper or a thin piece of paper, you can simply use tape, and any type of tape will work, and you can tape the tracing paper on top of the photograph and trace over it. You can see I just got some of the basic lines from this photograph. When you're finished with your tracing in pencil, remember you have to trace this in pencil, what you can do is you can remove the tracing paper, flip it over, and then this will actually transfer the graphite onto your paper. So that's one way that you can do it if you have tracing paper. But what if you don't have tracing paper? There's a few other ways you can do this as well. So one thing that you can do is, if you have a computer or a tablet or a phone, you can actually use that to trace as well. So you would grab your computer or your phone or your tablet, and you would pull up your image that you want to trace. So you can see I have my image here, Queen Latifah, that I want to trace. And all you'll need to do is you'll grab your piece of paper and you lay it down on top of the computer, just like that. And you might want to add a little bit of tape, just so it doesn't move around while you're drawing. And for this, I would use tape that you can easily remove from your screen. It's also really important for this that you don't press down too hard with your pencil and damage your computer screen. So also when you're doing this, it might be helpful if you dim the lights or turn them down a little bit so that you can see your image a little bit better. And then all you would do is you would just go in and gently, remember gently because you don't want to hurt your computer screen, just gently start tracing around the lines of the image. When you're finished, you can take it off and you'll have your design. You can continue to look at the picture as you're drawing so that you know where to shade in certain areas. So I would say, okay, well, I can look at my picture and see that this area of her eye and her eyebrow is black. So I would shade that in black. So that's another way that you can do a tracing for your portrait. Another thing that you can do, yes, there's one more option, just in case we don't all have, I know we don't all have all these materials, right? The other thing that you can do is, say you have a photograph, right? And this is obviously not a person, this is my cat. If you have a photograph, right, what you can do is you can take your photograph and you can take a piece of paper. And so my photograph is a little bit smaller than my paper. So what I would do is I'd flip it over, tape it on the back, and then I can actually take this, and you can even kind of see it. Even if I shine the light through it a little bit, you can kind of see the image through there. But what you want to do with this is take this over to a window. So any window will work. And the brighter outside, the better it's going to work, especially if it's a little bit darker inside. You might want to turn the lights down again. And you can tape your paper up to the window and then use the window almost like a light box so that you can see your design and trace it through. Like I said, there is nothing wrong with tracing. This is a fully original piece of art that you're going to be creating, right? So after you've completed your tracing of your portrait, you might also say, well, you know, I want to have some other elements traced as well. Maybe you want to trace kind of like a rose, right? Maybe you want to trace a rose on there. One thing that's great about tracing is you can find things from around the house, magazines, kind of random stuff you might have laying around that might have an image on it that you might want to trace, right? So for me, it's like maybe I wanted a rose on my design. I could just find something. This is just a bag I had in my house from buying some jewelry a long time ago. And I could actually just take this design and trace it onto my drawing using any of the methods that we used before, right? Holding it up to the light, holding it up to the window, maybe tracing something off of my computer again. There's lots of different ways that we can generate imagery for these designs. Once we have our basic line drawing of our portrait sketched out, remember, we're not adding too much detail in at this stage. The next step in our project is to add the text into our design. For this step of the project, all you'll need is a pencil, your paper to draw on, and then you might want to use a ruler and find a round object to trace later on. But don't worry about that for now. When we're thinking about text, the font that we use in our drawing can be just as important as the portrait itself. So the first step that we're going to do is we're going to go into our sketchbooks and practice drawing different fonts. Think about who the person is in your portrait and what the font might add to the whole idea of your poster. If you use block letters, that can seem kind of powerful, right? Maybe some cursive will make it look more fancy or almost antique. Maybe you want to use kind of graffiti-ish bubble letters. That could maybe be great if you're looking for kind of like, maybe the person you're working with is like a hip hop artist or a graffiti artist. Maybe you want really simple letters. Maybe you want a lot of movement in your letters. So what I want you to do is just go into your sketchbook and play around with different styles of fonts. Maybe you want to look up different fonts on the internet to work from. Maybe you want to find, different things around your house that you might have that might have a cool font on them that you can be inspired by. Any old magazines or advertisements, even, books have really great fonts on the cover. Anything that has writing on it, you can be inspired by the lettering and the font. And when we're working with letters, this is called typography, which is kind of the art of creating text. So one thing I'd like to show you is just a simple way to kind of work with letters. When I'm thinking about creating a block letter, here's what I do. First off, I might just simply, without using any type of block, I might just go ahead and just draw out my regular letter, right? Just very simply. This is what I would call kind of like the basic skeleton of the letter, right? It looks just like if I was writing anything out, just a single line. So maybe I might start off by just lightly with pencil, just writing out my letters. You can do that pretty quickly if you want. After I do that, what I can then do is I can take my pencil and start almost adding like a little bit of meat to the bones. So I can bring the line around like this, and see, that's kind of thickening my letter, right? And at this stage, you can keep it really sketchy. Just trace around the letter so that it becomes thicker, right? So I would put one line on one side of my Y and one line on the other side. It's almost like putting meat around the bones. That's a great way to just get started on drawing block letters. Once you have that, then you can go in and you can erase it, erase that inner skeleton, and then you can start kind of fixing up your lines on the outside too so that they look nice and smooth. This is just a fun thing to practice, and I highly recommend just practicing a bunch of different fonts in your sketchbook to see which one you want. The name that's on the poster can be very bold. Maybe you want it to be a little less bold, but the name should be a little bit more bold than the bottom text that we're doing. Or it doesn't have to be on the bottom, but the text that is going to be kind of the quote or the information should probably be a little bit smaller than the person's name, right? You want that person's name to be really eye-catching. So you want to try out kind of different fonts that make it look bold, right? And you want to think about how your font, like, you know, might affect the way the people view the person, right? If I was doing a font that was scary, maybe that wouldn't be the right font for Sylvia Rivera. You know, maybe I wouldn't want like a slime, you know, like a slime dripping font, right? That wouldn't be the right kind of person. Maybe for a vampire, if I was making mine for a vampire, that might be cool. So you just really want to think about your font and what it says about the person, right? You can do this same process with cursive. So if you'd like to write in cursive, you can write out your cursive, right? And then, just like before, just go in and start filling in some of the area so that the letters become a little bit thicker. And a little bit more bold. Maybe you want to add 3D too, around the outside. That is totally up to you. Just go ahead and practice some of your different fonts. Once you pick the font that you want to use, you're ready to start laying it out on top of your drawing. Since this is your final drawing, you want to work carefully on top of it. So you'll use your pencil, making sure that you have a nice eraser. And you're just going to start off by drawing very, very, very lightly. I know that I want my font to be at the top, kind of going around in a circle almost. So what I might do is I might take my round object, this is just a bowl, and I might lay it down and trace around it so that I can have a line to write my text across so that my text stays perfectly equal. I could also use a ruler, right? If I want my text going straight across, I could draw a line with a ruler going across. When you're starting to lay out your letters, you may have noticed before, maybe when you were drawing or you were writing something out, that sometimes, so say this is my paper I'm drawing on. Sometimes when you're drawing and you're writing out text, maybe you start writing it out across the paper. I'm just doing this really quickly as an example. And then when you get to the end here, oops, I ran out of space, so I have to draw my A really small. There's a really great way that we can stop this from happening when we are drawing. So what you can do is, I have my line here where I know my text is going to go across. And so this is a trick that I like to do. On a piece of scrap paper or in your sketchbook, you can just write out all the letters. So I wrote out all the letters right here. So then I'll count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this first word has 6 letters. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, so this has 6 too. So I know that I can put Sylvia on this side and Rivera on this side, and it'll be balanced. Another thing you can do is you can actually start with these letters and count backwards. So if there's 6 letters in here, I can go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I know in between the V and the L, that's the halfway point. So if this is my area that I'm going to use, right, this little line right here, I can mark the middle of that, and I'll know that my V starts here and my L starts here. So that's a great way that you can kind of start mapping out your letters. When you go to start actually drawing them on here, what I would recommend doing is first just really lightly in pencil without working out the bubble letters yet or whatever font you're using. I would just start by just lightly kind of drawing in the letters without adding any of the bubbles or any of the kind of block letter. Just really simple, right? That way I'm not spending a lot of time on my font and making a mistake. If I spend 15 minutes getting the perfect S, but I put it in the wrong place, right? I'm gonna have to erase the whole thing. So it's all about just using your time wisely. So since I drew that really simply, I can just kind of erase the whole thing and draw that a little bit more how I want it to be, a little bit more evenly spaced on the design. And remember, while I'm doing this, I have my kind of preliminary sketch to the side so I can make sure that I'm putting things on there the way that I did in this sketch. So then maybe I'd come in and add the R over here. And I wanted to use like a fancy font. Notice when I'm drawing the letters, how the bottom of the letter is hitting that line. If the bottom of each letter hits that line, all the letters are going to be equal in where they are on the page. So you want to make sure that you follow your line as you're drawing. Now that I have this simple, it's simply blocked out and I like the way it looks, right? What I can do next is I can go in and start adding my block letters around, just like I showed you before. Making that a little bit thicker, right? remember, again, we're not adding too much detail at this stage. We're basically just creating the underlying skeleton for the drawing. After you finish kind of getting your text exactly how you want it at the top, then you can work on the bottom portion of the text. And you can do this the same way. You can write it out, you can count the number of letters, and remember to draw it in lightly first in case you make any mistakes. And once you have it laid out exactly how you want it, then you can go in and start adding kind of however you want the font to be. After your text is fully in there, then you can start working on any additional background pieces you might want to put in. Or maybe you want to add some just interesting shapes into your composition. So just to go over again what we're going to be doing, you're going to start off by practicing different fonts in your sketchbook. Remember the fonts that I showed you? You can try any type of fonts that you want. You can use the internet for inspiration or find different books and things around your house that have cool text on them in different fonts. Then after you practice your fonts, you'll choose the one that you want to use. I wanted to use that one. And then you'll lay out the text simply on your page. You'll draw a line with a ruler or with a round object that you traced, and then simply lay out your text. And then after that, you'll finish your text by making it fancy, by adding any bubble letters or any kind of style that you want to add to it.